forget. And welcome to our October Child Outcomes Accountability Team meeting. We're going to spend most of our time today with folks from Let's Grow Kids. And I don't know, Sarah and Katie, if anyone from Vermont Family Network is joining us. But they're going to be talking about their specialized childcare survey that we spoke about quite a bit at our last meeting. The meeting before that, I'm unsure, as well as a related legislative proposal. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask folks, for the sake of time today, I think we'll just do introductions in the chat, if that is all right. So please in the chat, enter your name, your role, and where you sit. And I think everyone at this point knows me, but I am Building Bright Futures Policy and Program Director, Anna. It's great to see you all. I'm also going to do a quick plug and give folks a couple of minutes to complete the BBF October. We're doing a stakeholder or network survey, and we're really hoping to get as many folks to respond to that as possible by the end of the month. So I'm going to just read to you all a little bit about that survey to provide some context. And I will go ahead and enter the link into the chat before I kind of give you that spiel, so that folks can start to fill it out if you haven't already done so. But the purpose of this survey is to really give us a good sense of who we currently have at BBF tables. So if you're at this meeting, obviously you are part of our network. If you've attended any meetings or engaged in any materials throughout the year, you are part of the BBF network. But it's really to give us a sense of who you all are, how folks in the network identify themselves, and to kind of build us towards the next step of informing us with who else needs to be part of the network, to build out the most diverse group of early childhood stakeholders possible. It's an anonymous survey. It will take you less than 5 minutes. And we really appreciate everyone's participation. So if folks have questions, feel free to come off mute or put them in the chat. But I'm going to kind of be quiet for the next 2-3 minutes just to give folks an opportunity to fill that out. Thank you.
Anna, this is Cynthia, and I just had one question about the survey. I did complete it. I'm curious, as BBF does this around, about who's at the table, are there plans to solicit information from stakeholders about how they can contribute their voice, or what opportunities might better suit their needs? Because it did strike me like it's a great opportunity to sort of capture who is or isn't at the table, but that's different than actually capturing people's voices and opportunities to engage. So I was just curious if there might be a follow-up survey sort of around how people might offer information about how they can better engage with the network.
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Cynthia. I think it's a good one. I think that happens kind of, at least right now, at individual tables. So about a year ago, we went through a little bit of that process within COATS and doing, for folks that were part of the committee at that time, and at that meeting, we did like a series of questions on a Jamboard, thinking about specifically like who is missing from this table, what are kind of the topics we want to engage around. But I think like your broader point about surveying a whole network in a systemic way about those things is a really great one, and I'll definitely bring that to the team. But I think to answer your question right now, the plan or model is really that happens kind of a little bit more in silos. Any other questions about the survey or trouble completing it? No worries, Brina. Okay, I'm going to assume folks look fairly completed, but please reach out if you have any questions or follow-up stuff on the survey, and I'll be happy to help. All right, Sarah and Katie, I'm going to hand it over to you. I don't know that this work needs much introduction because I see many of the faces that are joining us this morning were part of that initial conversation. But I will just say, I think it's exciting for this group to kind of think about and engage with the topic of specialized childcare and the needs of families with children with disabilities and special healthcare needs. I think it fits really squarely in the mission and goals of our committee, and also that are expressed in the policy recommendations that were just endorsed by the SAC. So we're excited to have you join us, excited to hear a little bit more about the results of the survey and the kind of relevant legislative proposal at hand.
Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Kenny. I'm the Chief Policy Officer here at Let's Grow Kids. And it's so good to see all of you again. I'm not sure if anybody here was not here the last time we talked about this, but just at the highest level, we at Let's Grow Kids and the Child Care Campaign, sorry, I have a cat who really wants to be part of the meeting this morning. We are gearing up to come into the legislative session in 2023 with the bill that we've been working towards for a very long time. That was set in motion by H171, now Act 45, a couple years ago. So the systems analysis study has come back. The financing study will be back in December/January. We've been doing a bunch of work looking at the Child Care Financial Assistance Program and the expansions that have already taken place, and what we would need to do to move to a place to expand that program to a place where no family is spending more than 10% of their income on child care, and early childhood educators are compensated commensurately with their peers in other fields. And so as we've been sort of thinking through this big picture, and we have a sort of a draft bill outline that we've been working on, and some of you have been part of those conversations at other tables. As a part of that, we have been trying to think about, specific to childcare programs and specialized childcare, what are the specific considerations that we need to be taking into consideration as we're looking at how to expand the Child Care Financial Assistance Program really dramatically, to a point where the state is paying rates to programs that are high enough to support the true cost of care, which includes, wages and benefits for staff working in early childhood education programs, but also thinking about how do we make sure the programs have the supports that they need to ensure that every child has access and is able to thrive in their programs. And the survey work grew out of a conversation that we had along with the Family Network with the authors of the PIES report. And thinking about sort of what are next steps for that report. It's clear that we have a problem, right? And that programs are wanting to be able to support all kids, to be able to access their programs and to thrive in their programs, and they're struggling to do so with the resources that are available. So how are we thinking about what resources we might be able to leverage in this moment as we're moving this big bill that's going to involve additional revenue into the system? What do we need to be thinking about specifically? So that led us to partner with the Family Network to create the survey. And then we also talked to many of you here about the survey and getting it distributed. And thanks to all of you who helped us get it out there, because the response has been great. And so Katie's actually going to walk us through a PowerPoint that she put together of the results that we've seen so far. And then I'll talk a little bit more, and I would love to get thoughts from all of you about some legislative proposals that we're starting to piece together in light of the results of this and many of the conversations we've had with folks. Go ahead, Katie. I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone. So I will just share my screen and dive into some of the results we're seeing. Okay. Yes, so as Sarah mentioned, we worked with the Vermont Family Network to come up with this survey. And thanks to you all, we saw a great response rate from the distribution we partnered with you all with. We had over 146 respondents attempt the survey, and 86 of those respondents cleared the screening questions, which asked if they lived in Vermont, if they had a child under 6, and if they had a child with specialized needs. So diving in, these are some of the key findings we've found so far. Families often need multiple types of support for their young children with specialized health care needs in their household. Families use a patchwork of care options to fill their childcare needs. Childcare is unaffordable to families, and families need financial assistance in order to access care. Families are also comfortable with their childcare arrangement. However, the majority of families have been asked to keep their child at home because of their behavioral health care needs at least once. So we'll dive into these key findings in the next couple slides. So who completed this survey? 86 Vermont residents with children under 6 with a disability or specialized healthcare need are the people that responded and completed the survey. Respondents participated from 13 of Vermont's 14 counties and were racially, ethnically, and economically representative of Vermont families. Respondents represented families with children with a wide array of developmental stages. 30% of respondents had an infant, 38% of respondents had a toddler, and 52% of respondents had a preschooler. Respondents also represented a wide variety of specialized needs, and families often needed multiple types of support for their children. As you can see in this chart over here, it shows the types of needs families have. 86% or 82.6% had developmental needs, 72.1% had physical needs, 66.3% had behavioral needs, 65.1% had mental health needs, and 61.6% had medical needs. So diving into the usage of care. As I mentioned, families use a patchwork of programs to fill their childcare needs, often using more than one childcare arrangement. As you can see from the chart here, a large portion of families use a childcare center or preschool, with 51.6% using that childcare program, a childcare center or preschool. And then moving up, 32.3% have their child cared for in their home, but someone outside the home comes in, provides that care. And then 25.8% or have their child cared for in a preschool in a public school. And parents often cite 3 main reasons for using care. 58.1% of adults use care so adults in their household can participate in paid employment. 56.5% say the reason that their child is in care is so that they can receive those services that they need. And another 46.8% say that their child uses care so that they can gain social and emotional skills. So those are the 3 main reasons we saw that parents chose their child care arrangement. And parents often need flexibility in their hours of care. 74.2% stated that childcare impacts their hours to work or their schedule.
Katie, I don't know if you can see questions in the chat because you're sharing your screen, but Becca just asked if we know if the pre-K folks who are using pre-K in public and private preschools, do we know if that's duplicated in childcare, or like the 50% that were in childcare or preschool? Does that question make sense? Or do you want Becca to clarify? I don't know that we know the answer, right? Because people could select as many options as they wanted to here, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yep, they had the chance to select multiple options in this option and in this for this question. So sorry, I don't have the breakdown for that.
Becca, if that's not what you were asking, feel free to hop in and say so.
Nope, that was exactly what I was asking. I wanted to, when I was looking at this, I was thinking like, is this pre-K in our private centers, right, duplicated in that pre-K with private schools? So that was exactly what I was asking.
Could be, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. That's a good follow-up question. Thank you. Okay. So we then asked specific questions about the learning environment and how parents are feeling about their child care arrangement. And families are comfortable with their child care arrangement. 82.3% of families or of respondents found that using care felt at least somewhat confident in the fit of their child care arrangement. and 35.5% felt very confident, as we can see in this top chart here. 83.9% of those using care felt that their child care program met their child's disability or other special health needs, which is great to see. However, 61.3% of families have been asked to keep their child home because of their behavior or health needs. You can see that here. These are the people that responded yes to being asked if their child could be kept at home, which is a strange paradox there, with people feeling comfortable and confident in their fit, but then also being asked to keep their child at home because of those needs. Here we can see like parents rate different factors in their child's learning environment. We asked them to rate their learning environment based on excellent, good, fair, poor for these factors: nurturing environment, school readiness, getting along with other children, supporting specialized needs, their relationship with their child care provider, their collaboration with their child care provider, and their communication with their child care provider. And as you can see, most families found that their child care arrangement was good or excellent there. With looking specifically at nurturing environment and supporting specialized health needs, you can see that the excellent rate is very high too. So moving on to affordability, found that childcare is largely unaffordable for families. This chart here shows how much respondents pay for childcare each week. 27.4% pay above the 2019 market rate survey rates that were found in. So that's these top three bars here, with 3.2% paying $400 or more for their childcare each week. 74.2% of respondents are enrolled in Vermont's Child Care Financial Assistance Program, and 69.4% of respondents have outside help paying for childcare, not including CCFAP, which comes from either employer-related benefits or other financial assistance programs that they can enroll in. And we also asked some questions about the search for childcare, trying to find what parents' priorities were and how they select their childcare arrangement. And we also asked about like the obstacles families were finding in their search for care, and we found that access is the largest obstacle for most families. And included in that access question is the location, whether they had openings, whether they were waitlisted, the hours that were offered, and whether they were able to support the family's needs. And most families cited that the schedule or hours were the largest component in their search. It was one of the most important factors for them, is whether it was available during the hours that they needed. So that's what families are basing their searches on. And you can see here too, that 75.8% look for location and whether there's space available. So it's, in terms of priorities, the access question is the most important. Yeah, so those are some of the preliminary results that we're seeing. We plan on doing a follow-up focus group to dive more and get a better understanding of the results that we've seen. And we're partnering with Vermont Family Network to follow up with those people and get that organized. And as Sarah mentioned, we're using the findings of the survey to guide our work and incorporate it into our policy agenda and asks. Okay, I will stop sharing my screen then. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Katie. I wonder if it makes sense to pause for a minute in case folks have questions about the survey results before we talk a little bit more about the legislative agenda ideas that are percolating. Renee, I see your hand.
Hey, good morning, everyone. You can hear me okay? I'm seeing my box light up.
Yeah.
Thank you for that presentation, Katie, and thank you, Sarah, and the whole Let's Grow Kids team for that work. It's great to dive a little bit deeper on this issue that we know is a big one. I was curious to just try to put some context around the number of respondents that we had and wondering if we know, I mean, I can probably Google it, but thinking about like the number of kiddos, at least in the state who under 6 who have an IEP or an IFSP, like wondering if we have any information around framing, because, and you all know me, I love qualitative data. So for me, it's not a matter of like, oh, the results are such a small pool that we can't extrapolate anything. Like, no, I do not believe that, but I am just a little bit curious about what portion of the population that we actually captured in this survey. Any ideas?
That is a great question. I have not pulled that framing into context, so I will happy to like dive more into those details and provide that context out, but appreciate that, Renee.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, we didn't set out to have like a scientifically valid survey per se, but more getting the qualitative information that I know we all love. But it's a great, but the response was way more than we expected, honestly. So, which is great. So it is a great question about, unless somebody else here already knows off the top of their head how many kids under 6 have an IEP or 504 plan. And it's important that I think that we can't necessarily assume that everybody who completed the survey has an IEP or 504, right? But probably many of them.
That was the best proxy I could think of, right? Because that
Exactly.
also doesn't include other things and kids who haven't been identified yet,
Right.
but it was the
Yeah.
closest thing I could think about in terms of
Yeah.
of
That's a great
proxy. And I
question.
think too, for the focus group, Becca, you beat me to the punch around that question around access and patching things together, because intuitively thinking the fact that UPK hours really are just those 10 hours a week, and being able to dive in a little bit deeper around like economics and like folks who are able to attend a public preschool who the 10 hours works versus it's a little bit more of that forced choice in our system. If folks aren't able to do that at the public school, oftentimes they're going to try to find a private provider that has those longer hours. So would love to hear more after those focus groups around the UPK piece. Yeah, and I'll stop there, but thank you.
Becca, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I don't want to get into discussion about suspension and expulsion. That's like the nightmare
Wow.
of the world right now.
Yeah, I know, right? But it is underlying a lot of this.
It's
here.
underlying a lot of this. Well, and I'm loving the data that we do have. Like Renee, I'm like, ooh, I can't wait for the focus group results. But I'm not surprised by the 61.3% that were asked to keep their children home or to pick them up early.
Right.
I'm looking at the discrepancy and I'm thinking about the conversations and how to steer that as part of this legislative effort. Because the last results out of AOE were much, much lower, like single digits. And my guess and experience in conversations with both the AOE and providers is it's a reporting, right? It's a reporting capturing number. But I'm thinking about like the next step and how we communicate that to people who aren't in the early ed on the ground work, that 61 is probably more valid number.
Right. 61% of the 86 respondents, right? I mean, we have the N of how many of those families that was your experience. And Katie, am I remembering right that the question was whether your child has been asked to stay home for a day or more?
We asked if they have been asked to be picked up early, asked if they've been asked to stay at home for a day, asked if they've been asked to leave the child care program because it's not a good, or if they've been asked to find a new child care program because it's not a good fit. And then of course we asked if they have never been. So we broke it out in terms of 5 multiple choice options, and those were the 5. And so across those 4 yes options that they've been asked to leave or asked to be kept at home, 61% said yes. If that provides a little bit more clarity.
So yes, we're also really looking forward to the focus group and hearing more about those individual experiences. I mean, I think everybody here hears those experiences from families directly from one level or another, and I know the Family Network hears a lot of them. And it's, as Katie pointed out when she was presenting the data, there's just this interesting juxtaposition between the fact that families are generally confident in the fit and feel like their program supports their child's needs, and yet their child is being asked to leave the program, you know, for at least early or for a day or more. So, you know, we'll learn a lot more in the focus group, but in our initial, you know, guesses are the bar is pretty low right now, right? If you're a family with a kid who has high needs in terms of finding something. So what feels like a good fit now might not feel so great in a universe where everybody was resourced to do this work properly. So there's that sort of conjecture. And then also, I think what we've been hearing repeatedly from lots of different people is that it's not that child care programs don't want to help the kids in their care, right? It's not that they are not lovely, nurturing people who really want children to succeed. It's that they're struggling to find the resources that they need and the supports that they need to support those kids in classrooms. Yeah, Cynthia, go ahead before I dive into the legislative conversation we're having.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I was just going to sort of acknowledge too, I think one of the inherent challenges with self-reporting like this is, as a parent, it's got to be gut-wrenching to say that you don't like your childcare choices.
Exactly.
So I think that there could be some of that as well, right? Like, I'm not super confident, but I don't want to put that on paper.
Right.
I think that's really challenging for families. The other question that I sort of have, or where my thoughts are sort of heading, is sort of matching this parent reporting survey with, of course, childcare provider information that we've gathered about what are the supports then that are really needed. Like, we know families need access, we know they need affordability, you know, they need hours that match, and yet childcare providers have stated, you know, a lot of the different types of supports that they need in order to make this work too. And Sarah, you're probably about to launch into this, but really sort of matching these 2 data sets to try to figure out, and there's no easy lift, but, you know, what is the lowest hanging fruit that we could really take a look at? Because it's a really tough nugget. Yeah,
it is. Thank you, Cynthia. It's an excellent point about the reluctance to sort of publicly, even if it's an anonymous survey, acknowledge that that the situation your kid is in is not ideal. So I definitely hear that too. And thanks for that lovely segue into thinking about sort of low-hanging fruit options here. We have been in touch with lots of folks, some of whom are here right now, to think more about what are some resources that we could put in place with this childcare bill to be able to help childcare programs access the supports that families are identifying that they need, and that programs are identifying they need to be able to keep kids in programs. And sort of the ideal world is one in which there's a future vision for what a true comprehensive CIS program could look like. And that is not the work that we need to do in the childcare bill. We've been in conversation with lots of the folks at the CIS table and been like, what in the perfect world, what would that look like? And they're like, we're not 100% sure what that actually is right now. So while we move toward that world, we've been trying to talk to folks, especially people operating specialized childcare programs and specialized childcare coordinators and folks supporting them about what could we do right now to at least get resources to programs. And but there's a lot of focus on the special accommodations grants right now, because there's transition happening, that the funds haven't been released yet, and folks are kind of, it's very top of mind for people, I think. And because that's been one of the sole resources available to programs to figure out how to support children in their care. So while we're kind of waiting for the Special Accommodations Grant 2.0, or the Inclusion Support Grants, I think is what they're going to be called, right? Amy can probably help me with that. No, is that not what they're going to be called the next round? Anne, you can probably help me with this.
Jill can speak to this better. She's
Oh, Jill's
also
here
on the
too,
call,
right?
but
Sorry.
right. But it's not going to be called Inclusion Support Funds in the next round.
Oh, okay, great. Well, whatever it's going to be called in the next round, we've been trying to think with people about how could we expand that program, essentially work with what's there right now, but think about a model that would get programs, the supports real time that they need to be able to support whatever kids are in their care, that has a regional coordinating component to it, but that is able to leverage funds pretty quickly for programs without a really cumbersome application process and without the 6-month reapplication component that's there now. So we've been talking about structuring something that's essentially like a Special Accommodations 3.0, or whatever the terminology is, that would have an expanded pool of funds and also additional resources at CIS coordinating entities to be able to staff and like some additional funds, and that regionally CIS coordinating councils, is that the right term, at the regional level for the CIS regional coordination? Sorry, I haven't slept in like 2 days, so I'm losing some words today.
Well, there's the
I don't have my
Vermont
notes in front of
Interagency Coordinating Council. That's the statewide. At the
Yeah, no,
regional,
we're thinking about the CIS regions. Yeah.
the CIS admin team, administrative team, maybe you're thinking of. And then there's an intake and referral team and a consultation team. There are 3 regional teams.
Right. Okay. So it's probably the consultation team that I'm talking about then. So an entity at this is why I'm so glad you're here, Anne. An entity at the regional level that can work with childcare programs in that region to figure out who are the kids in your care right now, what are their needs, how do we, like, what are the resources that you need to meet them. And so thinking more about what programs need to support kids in their care as opposed to individual applications for children, so that if there are multiple kids in one program who have a need that can be resolved through specialized training for the folks in that program, or there are multiple programs who have similar needs, being able to leverage that, just basically having more flexibility in that funding for folks at the regional level to be able to support programs. Yes, programmatic supports, right. Excellent, thank you for helping me with my terminology. And that it would be, so there would be, I don't know, some kind of formula that would allow funds to go out to the regions to be able to do this kind of coordinating work with programs, get those funds out to programs as needed, and have some ability to also move those funds around. So if one region has really high needs right now and another doesn't, that there's some ability to be able to move those. Yes, I am curious whether there's been conversations about this in PDG planning, because as we're trying to figure out what we put into a legislative proposal, it's like we want to make it clear that this is a need for families, right, and that this is a need for childcare programs, and this is a tool to prevent suspension and expulsion from childcare programs, and want to like have the legislature thinking about all of these things. And it would be amazing if there were funding coming from somewhere else too, like a PDG grant or somewhere else. So I saw just somebody's hand up. But, oh, there, Jill. Hi. Are you able to talk, Jill?
Yes, I am. You can't see my.
Hey.
I couldn't find the mute, unmute for a moment. Well, I was just going to say, I mean, we are having the same conversations within CDD right now, and special accommodation grants. We annually have a very small budget consistently, and what we have thought about is it's not. We have to keep reminding folks it's not really about getting rid of the special accommodation grants, because they are really for those kids that are at the top of that pyramid model, who can't be in childcare without that additional support due to safety issues. They're not really about like as much as we want them to be, we want the middle of the pyramid to really look at kids'
Yeah.
developmental needs and who needs additional care and who needs more support by additional staffing, which is different than a child who really needs to have that one-on-one in place in order to access childcare. And so the inclusion support funds were part of thinking about how do we get it to programs without looking at individual children. And we just have not, we're still working on SAG grants and getting them posted. So
Yeah,
I think that we're all thinking about the same things.
I think you're right. I think the thinking here is if we could actually resource SAG and
Yes.
structure it in a way that you all aren't as confined by the many strictures that are in place and structures that are in place and administrative hurdles. Like what would that look like in order to actually get funds out to programs when they need them to support kids? And as you're saying, not just the like triaging the highest needs circumstances, but really supporting all kids. Renee, I saw your thing.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback a little bit on that and thinking about, you know, the intent of the COAT committee, because as I was getting ready and looking back, and, you know, I love that we put it right on the heading around cross-sector collaboration and thinking about the importance of those connections between childcare and mental health right now, right? Because that's what we're hearing from programs. Because Jill's absolutely right, like we'll always need SAG grants. But there are a lot of children and programs that could be supported in those, you know, behavioral and those types of needs by access to, right, early childhood family mental health, those pieces. And I think what I'm reminded of, there's a little Cheryl Wilcox on my shoulder, right, reminding us of the workforce issue and how this is such a crunch. And so just kind of globally wondering like how this committee as a vehicle maybe is thinking about those intersections and supporting that, because if we keep working in a silo and like we've talked about the quality coaching, right, and these level of supports, personally, I think it's a slippery slope when we start wanting childcare providers to be mental health clinicians, right? Like they're not. They need access to training and support. So I also wonder about the opportunities to really link arms, and what are we as BBF not just supporting early childhood educator workforce or early childhood workforce like early interventionists, but what are we doing to support the mental health workforce? Because I know Jill and I agree on this, like our statewide infrastructure on early childhood and infant mental health pieces, like they're just not there. And so I know that those programs need support. We know that training isn't it. I'm hoping that quality coaches will be that relational based support that can help programs think about what they're learning about trauma and mental health and implement those practices. But I still think we need to be paying attention to the mental health workforce and how are we really aligning those efforts and not expecting childcare providers to be mental health clinicians or experts.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. And we at Let's Grow Kids keep coming back to, and the child care bill is not going to solve the broader workforce crisis, but we need to always be talking about it within the context of families have many needs. And they're like, yes, in order for this to be successful, you need clinicians and you need practitioners who can be in programs supporting programs or in programs supporting kids. Without that workforce, it makes it really hard. I'm curious what
I just want to quick,
go
sorry,
ahead, Nan.
Sarah.
No,
Just quickly
what
say,
else do you have for us?
echo what Jill said, that these conversations are the same as what's going on at the
sure
state
they are.
level within CDD. And Sarah, I really appreciated how you painted this picture of both and, right? Like we need support around individual children and we need program supports.
Yeah.
And both things need to be in place, and funding, more easily accessible for programs.
And I'm just seeing Anna's comment. I mean, I'll just touch in on PDG
Yeah, what's in
and
there?
kind of what we're thinking, right? So EMTSS, early multi-tiered systems of support, and really thinking about that pyramid. So being able to build on the EMTSS 1, 2, 3 recommendations that came out of, oh, I almost said race to the top. Nope, round 1, PDG planning. Thinking about how we expand those types of support. And like Jill said, concentrate on the middle of the pyramid as opposed to the top. So in the last draft of PDG that I've seen, we're definitely hoping to allocate additional funding to early MTSS. I know I'm not a spokesperson for the Agency of Ed, and I don't see anyone from Agency of Ed on, but I know it's current, and I think it was partnership, right? Part C and Part B for the SPDIG grant, and thinking about early
Wait, what's that?
MTSS.
That's an acronym I don't know. What's splitting?
And help me out.
I don't
State,
know what's, but
Oh, this is so
Go ahead, Jill.
validating.
I'm trying to remember right now.
interagency, no, I don't know what it is, but it's a program, application that AOE submitted, and in this round partnered with CDD, CIS early intervention to look at early MTSS across a broader age range. And I am not yet able to speak to the details of that.
Cynthia's got it. Yay,
Personnel
Cynthia,
development
gold
fund.
star.
Okay, I've never heard of that before. All
So
right.
it's really an opportunity for AOE as the Part B administrator in Vermont. That's why they took the lead and then partnered with Part C to think about spanning those age ranges. But that project before PDG was looking at increasing early MTSS implementation sites. And that pot of money, I think over the next 2 years, we were hoping to get 18 implementation sites. With the addition of PDG, last I saw, we're hoping to get up to 80 implementation sites. And important to note, the implementation sites are different than, what's the other word? Is it project? Demonstration sites. So they're implementation that are doing full fidelity, and then there are other programs who are also receiving supports, just not to the same level as the demonstration sites. So we're hoping to expand that work broadly. I think the other touch point in PDG is around this inclusion piece. And, you know, initial drafts were really, we tend to be focused on the SAG grants, Those are not going to solve all of our problems. We never have enough money. We need to focus on the other piece of the pyramid. So last draft I saw, what we had written in was really more general language around direct service dollars for supporting inclusion. And
Great.
so this idea about having the both and, where we still have SAG grants and there's still some work to be done to reduce the administrative burden and make those more timely and responsive to programs, but then other opportunities to really think of, you know, I have been referring to it as inclusion support funding. I know that there are different ideas and connotations with that language, but that concept of not just a pot of money for individual children and their equipment and their needs and supports, but money for programs to think about program-wide inclusion efforts and what that might look like. So that's all drafted in there. We submit, I think, next week, and we anticipate an award. Awards will be announced before December 31st. So.
Great. That is really helpful. And it sounds like the funding that's in there is pretty in line with what we've been talking about. So that's good to know. That's great. I think what we will probably do is leave some language in here that expresses the need for something like this that supports both kids in programs and programs. And then hopefully by the time the legislative session starts in January, we'll know whether there's funding available through PDG to support some of this and what else might be needed from the legislature.
Probably also worth noting that there's some funding going to DMH efforts and thinking about workforce retention and recruitment, thinking about, I'm going to butcher it, child parent psychotherapy. I'm not going to get it right, but some specific strategies within mental health, focusing on young kids too. So thank you, Amy,
Exactly.
although I don't know what CPP and PCIT stand for.
Right.
So
Child parent psychotherapy and parent child. Oh, somebody,
Interaction.
yeah, thanks. I knew
Therapy.
it like 3
Therapy.
seconds ago and then I stopped.
Right. I'm telling y'all,
Have
it's the
it here.
morning.
It's a weird morning. I don't know.
Yeah, I've lost all my words this morning. It's a change in the weather. I don't know what it is, but this is all very validating when you all ask for clarification of acronyms. That I'm like,
Well, and we're a field with too many acronyms, I would
that too.
suggest.
Any other words of wisdom for us as we try to finalize a legislative agenda? I really appreciate all your support.
I wonder, Sarah, if you could speak to those. Oh, Jill, it looks like you're not on mute. If you could go ahead and mute yourself, we're hearing some background noise. Sarah, I wonder if you could speak a little bit, circling back to those focus groups that you're doing with folks who filled out the survey, presumably. If you will be consulting them at all on the legislative ask.
I think that is, yeah, part of the goal. And Katie, why don't I let you take this, but I'll say that I would, yes, love to sort of float some ideas by them in the focus groups that are percolated and see if that would feel like it would help. Go ahead, Katie. I don't know what the conversations have been in the
Yeah.
past couple weeks.
Yeah, I think we're trying to dive into some of these questions from the results of the survey. So I think, but additionally, we would like to see kind of the more solution side to what we've got from the feedback we've gotten back, if parents have any proposed ideas. So I think there's definitely going to be both aspects present in that focus group.
Excellent. All right. I don't see any other
Thank
questions.
you all so much.
Yeah, thank you, Katie and Sarah, for
Really
joining us,
appreciate it.
and you all are, in my experience, quite available on email. So if folks have follow-up questions, I'm sure you'll be happy to support them. That pretty much concludes our meeting. I'd want to just plug again the survey if you didn't get a chance to complete the BBF network membership survey, please do so. And similarly, if you can remind your colleagues that you know sit on VCAP committees or regional councils or other tables, we would really appreciate that. Again, we're trying to get as many responses by the end of the month, both for our own interest, but also for some like grant reporting deadlines and things of that nature. So we would love your help with that. Kind of general committee business, we will likely be either canceling November's meeting or rescheduling it, given that it falls on Thanksgiving. We'll kind of see in the next week or two based on topics and issues that are coming up for BBF and this group, if we need to hold that meeting or if we'll just cancel and reconvene in December. Our December meeting, the schedule also will be a little bit different. We are hoping to hold our meeting in partnership with the Data and Evaluation Committee. Again, given kind of the week that our meeting falls on, and I think we've had a lot of interest from this group in thinking about and talking a little bit more about data integration and how it relates to our committee priorities and goals. So I think it'll be great for us to kind of hold that cross meeting. And I think our agenda is TBD, but we'll try to have it kind of be an interesting one that again kind of combines the interest and goals of our two groups. So if you have thoughts or ideas about that, please feel free to send them along. And I think that's about it. Or do folks have any questions or any announcements you want to make on behalf of your own organizations or teams? I'm just opening up the chat. Oh, I think that question might be for you, Katie and Sarah.
Yeah, I was just looking at your question, Cynthia. It's a great question. I think there's only going to be one focus group, as far as I know. And the thinking right now is to do specifically families. It's an interesting idea to do it as a combination.
Yeah, we talk about reducing silos, and it just suddenly occurred to me it'd be really interesting, especially given the survey data that says communication is pretty decent about this
Mhm.
topic. So it'd be kind of an interesting opportunity to capture both sides at the same time and maybe build better understanding about what some of the barriers are and what some of the needs are. It was just a thought.
Yeah, I know. I always wonder if folks would be as candid with programs there. But I love that. I'm all about the idea of breaking down silos. So, cool idea.
And we will be, I see Renee's idea about families and communities. Sarah will be joining us for next Thursday morning's Families and Communities Committee to talk through the legislative agenda for this year a little bit more broadly. But that meeting is certainly open to everyone. I don't know that we necessarily we haven't necessarily invited like a broader group of folks, but we're excited to host that conversation next week.
If y'all have more ideas after this, then definitely feel free to email Katie and me too.
Excellent. All right. We'll give folks 5 minutes back of their Thursday mornings. Thank you all for joining. It was really good to see everyone. And thank you again, Sarah and Katie.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Take care.